Good morning, everybody. I hope you are enjoying the beginning of Bruegel annual meetings. It's really an honor for me to be here with you all, and for those online as well. So I just have to be very brief on my intro because we have amazing speakers. I'm not even going to spend the time in introducing you, if you allow me, because we want to use the time for what is most important, which is to discuss Asia for Europe. And Europe for Asia, if I may, because I'm sure there will be Asian listeners online, and we do have quite a few already in the room. I can't think of a better time to talk about Asia and Europe. And this is not only because of President Trump, and I feel already like dismayed that we are starting the conversation with his name, and we have so many things to talk about other than Trump, which we will try very hard in this session. But also because Asia has become much more complex. We have been having this conversation on Asia at our annual for so long. And it was very China-centric for many years, to be frank. And I think today what we are trying to bring here is the complexities of Asia. Asia, growth-wise, so if we think about growth markets, has three major poles, two represented in the room: India, China, and ASEAN. These are three complementary, but sometimes substitutable poles. Sometimes you have India growing very fast, China, a little bit slower. Sometimes we have ASEAN being, so bear in mind, Asia is not a block for trade, it's not a block for investment. It's a diverse region, and we have to understand this in Europe. And I think we are starting, because we have a lot of negotiations actually successfully completed recently, and others coming in. So we'll hear more about Europe's understanding of this reality. Beyond growth markets, Asia is also a massive pole of investment, and we can't think of any better country than Japan in this panel, because it's the largest investor in the world in portfolio terms, so basically buying things that we Europeans are finding increasingly difficult to place. Also the US, by the way, which is sovereign bonds. Japan is the largest foreign investor in most European sovereign markets, believe it or not. So Japan is extremely important for investment, and this is also true for FDI. So for me, it is really an honor to be here to talk about these growth patterns, but also about investment patterns from Asia into Europe. And I'm going to start with India. We'll follow then China, Japan, and Europe, because the idea of this conversation is to, of course, focus on growth, export markets for Europe, you name it, supply chains, actually free trade agreements in the making, India. All of that is very important, but also investment. So that's why we're going to start with kind of the most obvious growth and large market in Asia, India. Then we'll talk about China as a transition, in the sense that China will become eventually a mature economy, humongously large, but also an investor. And what does that mean for Europe? And then the largest investor in the world, Japan, third. And then we'll hear from Maria about how Europe sees this region. So without further ado, we're going to have short intros, and then we'll have a discussion, and hopefully we'll get as many questions as possible from the audience. Please, Suman, the floor is yours.
Do I understand that short is 5 minutes? Or?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, right.
Suman, I said I wouldn't introduce you, but just a word. Suman Berry is the vice chairman of Niti Aayog, which is the planning agency in India. Can't think of a better person to tell us where India is heading economically.
Well, let me just add to that, that I'm obviously very grateful to the organizers for inviting me here. But I do think that I need to declare that I have a past association with Bruegel, and was a non-resident fellow of Bruegel, and I'm told from 2016, and I'm told my name can still be found on the Bruegel website. But I'm here from Niti Aayog, and I do want to start by saying that when I was admitted, invited by Guntram Wolff, who unfortunately is chairing a parallel session in 2016, he was very clear. He said, actually, there's not a lot of interest in India, in Europe at the moment. Everybody is mesmerized by China, but we'll make a bet on the future. So what, I think it's right to say is that India and the EU have been sort of hidden partners, or have been in the shadows. Now, there was a big development that took place in earlier this year when all of the European commissioners visited India, and there was an agreement that between our Prime Minister and the Commission President that we would aim to have a free trade agreement by the end of the year, and as Alicia has said, that our negotiations are continuing even as we speak. So I just want to provide a thought experiment. I don't know how many of you were in the last session when it was indicated that the EU and Bruegel is looking forward to the next 20 years. India has set itself the goal of being an advanced society by 2047, which is 100 years after Indian independence. So about, just a little bit less than 25 years from now. And the question really is, how does India and the EU and India and the rest of Asia fit into that game plan? I think we know that the interaction between China and India was China and the EU took place essentially under MFN disciplines and with a rather fragmented set of investment protocols, national investment protocols. And I think the question for us in India now is whether a different kind of architecture might induce Europe to, and Europe, the European private sector in particular, to cultivate India with the attractiveness and with the energy that it displayed towards China 10 or 15 years ago. Now, what are the reasons for focusing on India? I think there is the issue that Alicia already mentioned, which is the fact that it has been a development success up to now. It's been growing at 6% per year. But our aspiration in a changed global environment is to see whether we can accelerate our growth rate. And the reason why Europe is important to this is because European business can both has advanced technology to offer India via investment, trade perhaps is, and is perhaps associated with that, and also because it helps Europe de-risk its dependence on other markets, not only China, but also now the United States. I just want to make two other points. One, that in all of this discussion of the three growth poles, I don't think the world should forget the rest of South Asia, which is a contested area. But I would hope and expect that as India's dynamism gets established, we would be more successful in integrating. Pakistan is a different situation, but Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and these are all very populous young societies. Finally, the issue of timing. So India, for the next 15 years, will enjoy a demographic dividend in terms of additions to the global labor force, which are global in scale, at a time when many rich countries, Japan, most of the EU countries, actually fairly large parts of ASEAN as well, are going through a demographic transition. And this was really the bet that the US was placing on India until recently. We don't know where this would lead, which was that Indian minds and talent, cheap Indian minds and talent, coupled with American technology, would allow, as it were, the de-risking of the US economy as well. Let me leave it at that. I don't know whether I've used up my 5 minutes, and will come back to me.
Thank you, Suman. Thank you, Suman. These are very interesting ideas. Let me just shoot back very quickly so that you have the time to come back to me later or any other question. But I really think you hit the nail here with this idea of first, it's not only India, which is already very massive, but South Asia. Yeah, I mean this is where the demographics are still favorable. And how much that will matter in a world of automation, we don't really know yet, but it's a very interesting point for European exporters. But also the fact that it's not only about exporting, but about producing, manufacturing, yeah? And this is about supply chains. So this idea of you just said de-risking, US de-risking. Well, we happen to have come up with that concept even before the US, by the way. So what about European de-risking, i.e. supplementary, I wouldn't say alternative to supply chains to China, but supplementary, meaning creating a supply chain, European investment in manufacturing in India, which is less connected than ASEAN to the China-centric, existing China-centric supply chain. So what about that? And then what do you need from Europe? This is for Maria. Tech transfer, I mean, manufacturing investment, fine, but under which conditions? What do you need? Tech transfer, what about governance? How do we do this in a world maybe without functioning WTO? So, these questions as to how to strike a sustainable deal. And I'm not talking about sustainability here, but sustainable in the sense that we have the tools to create this supplementary supply chain. So on that note, I leave it there. We'll talk later. We're going to move straight to Wen, who is actually a senior, probably very senior. I don't know whether the senior word is here but a research fellow. But I know you're very senior. So let me add senior research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, a very, very amazingly productive, actually, think tank in China. Probably many of you received your newsletter. And I just want to hear from you about where China stands and opportunities for Europe.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm truly privileged to join Alicia and all these esteemed panelists here. So I want to say thank you, and also to Bruegel. Actually, I lived in Brussels. I worked and lived here for 2.5 years between the end of 2017 and July 2020. I was working for a Chinese news agency. So this was truly my home for 2.5 years, including the first 7 months of COVID. And it's truly great to be back here. And thank you for all the preparation and all these emails we exchanged before this panel. I've actually prepared something. And let me begin by sharing a few observations. I think first, interdependence remains the central fact, though the context is changing between China and the European Union. The numbers are well known. For example, in 2024, the European Union exported over 200 billion euros in goods to China and imported over 500 billion, resulting in a 300 billion deficit. But behind the deficit, which is often the focus of the news, of discussions. China was the EU's largest import partner and its third largest export market. These figures testify to the supply chain debts built over decades. An abrupt unwinding would be costly and unrealistic. And secondly, I think as represented in the panelists here, I want to say diversification across Asia is prudent, but I guess substitution of China is unrealistic. And as Alicia said, like the EU is looking for complementary like supply chains. Europe is deepening its ties with India, Japan, Korea, and ASEAN. So it's good risk management in a more volatile world. But China's unmatched industrial ecosystems, especially in green technologies and complete manufacturing stacks, mean it will remain an anchor, provided both sides manage frictions predictably. Third, China's macro pulse still matters for Europe. In the first half of 2025, China's GDP grew 5.3% according to official figures, with industry and services contributing broadly. Domestic challenges, most visibly in real estate and private investment, persist, but aggregate momentum supports European exporters in machinery, chemicals, and high-end consumer goods, and underpin joint value chains in clean tech. China is facing quite significant deflationary pressures, so businesses are suffering in China. But I actually heard from the European Chamber of Commerce in China that the European companies are actually handling it, seems to be better managing the deflationary pressure than its Chinese competitors. And fourth, frictions are real. Trade defense will be part of the landscape, whether Beijing or Brussels like it or not. So the most prominent case is, of course, the anti-subsidy probe into Chinese BEVs, battery electric vehicles. So there was this duties applied in addition to the normal 10% car tariff. This is the most prominent case, and Beijing doesn't like this, but I guess Brussels is quite determined. And fifth, final observation, investment flows show adjustment, not rupture. Despite tightening, screening and geopolitical uncertainty, Chinese FDI in the EU plus UK rose in 2024. It was a 47% year-on-year, according to Rhodium figures, I think. And so it's also the first increase since 2016, driven mainly by greenfield projects in EVs, batteries, and renewables. Properly governed, such projects can support Europe's decarbonization, create skilled employment, and deepen two-way confidence. I think it's not entirely new, but a vigorous debate has emerged in Europe regarding overcapacity in China. Let me offer three observations that may help keep this debate more constructive. First, especially in recent months, Beijing has begun to address disorderly competition at home. Chinese regulators and industrial bodies have recently signaled curbs on, what the Chinese call 内卷, price wars and involution-style competition in autos and the related supply chains, and tightened standards and entry conditions in PV panels manufacturing. Many governments have launched this move. While I guess I'm not sure, Chinese diplomats will say these are steps as a response to Europe, but the effect is aligned with EU concerns about sustainability and market order. And secondly, I think a lot of the overcapacity allegations is focused on environmental related industries, but Chinese capacity has played a divisive role in the global green transition. There is now a flood of affordable battery energy storage systems for lower income countries, including Pakistan. I guess you might have read the report in the Financial Times. I think the New York Times also recently reported that Chinese solar panels surged 60% in the 12 months to June 2025, with most growth outside South Africa. That's across Africa. More than 600 million people on the continent lack access to electricity. Power outages are common even where there are electricity connections. So Chinese capacity is starting to relieve energy shortages cleanly. Recognizing this contribution in the European Union, which is, in my opinion, arguably the world's most climate ambitious political body, would help depoliticize the conversation and strengthen strengthen the incentives for cooperation. And third, Europe's competitiveness objective is legitimate and compatible with cooperation. I'm sure Europe will insist on resilience, fair competition, and high standards. And China will insist on its commercial interests, which Beijing takes it very seriously. But I guess I'm pretty sure China can understand Europe's need for a degree of industrial security. I mean, in its own development, Beijing adopted many measures, and there were a lot of reports on that, such as joint venture requirements and investment shaping policies to promote technology transfer and the local value addition. If the EU, within reasonable bounds, adapts comparable tools for transparency, that can also give Chinese firms the certainty to integrate more deeply into Europe. And I'm towards the end, so maybe 3 more personal ideas. First, let's settle the BEV debate. Even though, as a matter of fact, the battery electric passenger cars that the EU imports from China amount to roughly, just 1 to 2% of the bilateral trade. This has sucked up the entire oxygen, and so a negotiated, off-ramp, whether through price undertakings, joint monitoring, or maybe some other tailored adjustments that could really tap the uncertainty and accelerate the electrification here, and also help shape the bilateral dialogue into a different and more positive atmosphere. And secondly, I think it's important, especially for the Chinese, to respect the diversification, reject zero framing. Europe's deeper ties with India, Japan, South Korea, ASEAN, strengthen resilience and are not inherently at China's expense, in my opinion. This path is through cooperation, multiple qualified, suppliers, interoperable standards, and joint, research and development, which I'm sure will benefit also the 1.4 billion citizens in India. These will widen rather than shuffle the pie. And finally, I'm based in Beijing, but I've kept some interesting observations about Europe. So I'm sure the Deputy DG has much better authority on this. But I think there seems to be a live debate about the EU's trade strategy, which some critics say still defaults to a rules-first WTO era reflex, excellent at casework, slower at the geoeconomic strategy, while competitors use statecraft to win supply chains. But my observation is Brussels has actually adapted with the anti-coercion instrument, foreign subsidies regulation, and also, of course, CBAM. I think the next step is to stitch these into a proactive, opportunity-seeking trade playbook that lifts EU competitiveness, accelerating EU-based clean tech investment, including from China, and securing critical inputs with Asia, including Chinese rare earth minerals, and offering predictable strategic market access, including for Chinese companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, sorry. That was quite a statement. So thanks for that. I'll cut your time in the Q&A. No, but you did cover a lot of issues that I think are very relevant. Let me, and these are questions for later, but I'll be brief. I think basically the offer, if I read it as an offer for Europe, is let's settle EVs. I'm sure we can find a way. You need them. Everybody needs them. We produce them. We force you into JVs, into tech transfer. Ask for it. Yeah, I mean, that's basically, I'm putting it very bluntly, but this is a Bruegel meeting, so we can be blunt here. And that might actually solve part of the problem. I'm not saying that should be done or not. Maria knows better. But the issue is that that's just, that is a consequence of a model. And the Chinese economic model is very simple. It's 30% global industrial production, which for many, I'm sure you saw that one's book, could reach 45 global industrial production in one single country in the world, with 15% global consumption. You do not solve that with a deal on EVs. I'm sorry. You just need a much bigger, wider macroeconomic solution for that massive imbalance. And the involution, you said, okay, this is handy, maybe diplomats in Beijing won't say this was for Europe or the US. In fact, it wasn't. It wasn't. That problem is China's problem, deflationary pressures, hitting margins, companies having literally no profitability, as you surely know. So the point is, China is suffering from this unbalanced economy. So, my question is, why not solve the big problem? We can here solve the small problem, but we need to solve the big problem, because that's a problem for Europe, for Japan, for everybody. And I think I would like to hear your views as to how to solve the big problem. On that note, we're going to move to the big investor in the room, Japan. And I just want to, just a word. Kikochi-san, Mr. Kikochi, is a senior manager director and a board member of IBEC. So this is really at the core of Japan's investment strategy, and we're going to learn why Japan is so important for global investment flows. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Alicia, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this prominent seminar. It's my great honor to be here from Japan, and I'd like to share a few perspectives of Japanese views on European countries. And maybe my goal today is to stress that how important the relationship between Europe and Japan is, and will be in the future. It will be more in the future. Because as all of us understand that there is a growing trend of the nationalism across many countries. And this shows that the rise of the protectionism and the kind of skepticism toward the multinationalism. And in turn, this affects the framework of the international multinational orders and the rule-based behaviors and so forth. And this shift has enhanced the importance of the collaboration between Europe and Japan. And under the framework of the multilateralism, Japan is supporting and committing to the common value with the European countries, which are the rule of law and the fair trade rules. And through the context of the Japanese commitment, we have had a kind of free trade agreement with many countries, and with European countries, we have the economic partnership agreement, which became effective in 2019. And in Asia and Pacific, we have the comprehensive and progressive agreement for Trans-Pacific partnership. And through these kind of initiative, Japan is strongly committed to promote rule-based, transactions. And this commitment clearly indicates that Japan is strongly committed to the cooperation over the division. And please allow me to introduce a bit about my institution. It is called the JBIC. It stands for the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. The JBIC is the policy-based bank, financial institution established by the Japanese government, and its mandate is to promote economic cooperation between Japan and overseas countries. And last year, we committed roughly 9 billion euros all over the world, and of which 25% is directed to Europe, which is making it the second largest regional allocation after the United States. And I can share you some of the few projects which we did in Europe. They are basically in the area of the telecommunications and the renewable energies. In terms of the electrification areas, we supported development of the 5G network framework by utilizing the kind of open RAN technologies in Germany. This is important not only because of the infrastructure development, but also the important from the economic security point of view. And in the area of the renewable energies, we supported the project of the geothermal power generating in Germany, offering the heating supply in Germany in certain area. And this technology has not become commercially viable yet. In a sense, it's not bankable from our point of view. But by combining the subsidies from the European Commission as well as the financing, this new technology project for geothermal power plant become feasible. And this is the way and how we are able to, Japan is able to contribute to the renewable energy development in Europe. I can say more project, but I'll stop here. But so this is how the we can work together in the area of the renewable energy. And also from the geopolitical point of view perspectives, Japan is playing the vital role for the stability in Asia. And we are dealing with the ASEAN countries for their development, and our commitment to Asia. Of course, the decarbonization is the key area for globally. But what we are doing in Asia is to achieve the both decarbonization and the economic growth. So we try to provide a variety of measures to strike the two birds by one stone. I mean, two birds mean that the decarbonization and economic growth. This is the model that Japan is providing to Asia and contributing to stability in the region. And coming back to the Europe, there is a security kind of a dialogue between Japan and the European countries. And the security discussion is steadily progressing between Japan and Europe. And for example, European-Japan security and defense partnership was announced last year, and the first key meetings were held this year in Brussels. The topics included like cybersecurity, is countering the disinformation, or maritime or space securities. So these are the areas where we can work together, because this is possible because Japan and Europe share the same values, common values. That's why we can work together even in the defense or security areas. It's quite difficult to distinguish between security and economy, right? It's dual usage is the common. So we have to do both, and we can do both because we share common values between Japan and Europe. So to conclude my first remarks, now the world is facing the kind of global prioritizing national interest, and it's become more and more important that the European Union, EU, and Japan work together to build stability and prosperity globally. And Japan is committed to play a key role together with the European countries in terms of the values and economies and securities. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. That's really illuminating, because we're bringing Japan to the table beyond what I said as a major investor, as a major source of cooperation. And I think that's something that you made very clear in your preliminary statements. I'm so sorry to bring back the elephant in the room. And that's not the elephant we hear about now with India-China discussions, but actually the big elephant. You mentioned that your largest market for JBIC is the US, and we're second to Europe. So I have a tricky question, sorry about this, for later. What's going to happen with your commitments and ours, by the way, to the US in terms of investment? How does JBIC, which I know plays a role clearly, foresee the impact? So will there be any reshuffling? I mean, will Japan be kind of forced, if you want, to look at the US more intensively, and will that have consequences for Europe? So as much as we want to cooperate, there's this pressure, and I'd like to hear from you whether we should be reassured that the pressure can be mitigated or not. Yeah, so that's my question for you. So Maria, the floor is yours. And I don't need to introduce you, but if anybody doesn't know Maria in this room, which I doubt, Maria is the Deputy Director General of DG Trade. Yeah.
Thanks, Alicia, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here in this panel and to participate in the whole of Bruegel events, which is always a fantastic opportunity. I'm going to try in my 5 minutes to do a very brief reference to our state of play of relations with China, but I'm not going to go down there for a change. I will try to concentrate on where we are in terms of our relations with the rest of Asia and why this is very important in the current geopolitical and economic situation. Very briefly with China, and you may remember the President of the Commission saying before the summer that we are at an inflection point, and we are. And I think in that respect, the limited outcomes in the last EU-China summit are quite telling. It was important in terms of being able to engage, in terms of being able to discuss, progress to some extent as regards one of the main and most urgent problems we have at the moment, which are the unjustified controls on exports of rare earths and other materials that have been imposed by China. But generally speaking, what we find is an unwillingness to address systemic concerns that have been put forward in a very consistent and clear manner. And I'm not talking just about overcapacity or seriously not focusing necessarily on trade deficits. What we're talking about is distortion of the level playing field. What we're talking about is the problems to have a real market access and the problems to have a real possibility to have fair competition once you are in the market. But I promise I will not disappear into this subject, but just to say at the moment what we are facing is greater difficulties to have a constructive engagement and a drifting of China in its trade relations towards a power-based approach. You could say, well, that is in the air. That's happening in many other countries, but is one that makes our relation more difficult. Now, going on to the EU and the rest of Asia, and let me start by the importance of preferential trade relations. And this is not new for us. We do have extremely important free trade agreements in the region, Japan being one, Korea being another, Singapore, Vietnam, and if I go to define Asia in a very broad manner, we also have New Zealand and hopefully close to also finalize with a number of other countries that I'll get back to now. But just why is this so important? Very obvious. The fast growth of a number of those economies, the importance of a number of those countries as manufacturing hubs, and an increasingly sophisticated consumer market. And by no means saying all the economies or all the countries are equal in the sense of their economic development, and some of them are very specific and sometimes quite challenging when trying to negotiate a free trade agreement with them, but they are very important, and the diversity of the countries in the region is also reflected in the manner in which we engage with them increasingly. These FTAs work, and I'm not going to start throwing numbers at you, but clearly the increase in trade and investment, because remember, they do cover as well. Investment is something that is there and can be quantified very easily as regards those that have been in place for a number of years. What we see now is a momentum for increased engagement and negotiation. And there are two very important negotiations that we are hoping to get to the finishing line within this year. One is Indonesia, where there was already an agreement in principle at political level between the Indonesian president and our president before the summer. The other one is India, where, as you said in a prior discussion, we are negotiating as we speak. There is the commitment to accelerate those discussions and to conclude before the end of the year. We are talking about, in the case of India, the world's fourth largest economy. In the case of Indonesia, the sixth economy in Asia. And we are also engaging very actively. So we are back into full steam negotiation in DG Trade. We are also engaged very actively with the Philippines, with Malaysia, with Thailand, and we still need to conclude with Australia. So Asia is very much in our focus of interest, and there is something very important as well that I would like to make as a point. FTAs are living structures, and FTAs are also, because they are legally binding agreements, a base for further cooperation based on rules. We have used our FTAs in Asia, for instance, to upgrade rules related to digital trade with Japan, with Singapore, with Korea. We are using as well that privileged relationship we have to start working on economic security, on resilience of supply chain. Trade is no longer just trade, you know it, it's even reflected in our name as a DG. We deal with trade and economic security, and the FTAs do play a role in that respect. Now, I think this engagement is particularly important at this point in time. It's not only the complementarity of our economies or the growth or the importance that some of these countries may have in our green transition, think about Indonesia nickel, or in our digital transition, think about Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines, semiconductors, think about the technology in Japan. But similarly, we do have a very similar approach towards believing in rules-based trade. And that is now a priority for many of us. I think we all put a premium on transparent, predictable, and enforceable trade rules. That's what an FTA provides. We share an interest in diversifying our trade relationships and working on economic security. And I think as well we share the conviction that this current situation where might is right as an approach to trade relations is a very volatile approach and one that hurts us and one that we should try to avoid. So there are reasons that are pressing that have developed in the last months that makes for us very clear that the engagement with Asia is particularly important. And I think that engagement, and with that I will finish, will also be important going forward when we think about the new trade system that we're going to have to work in. Whether we're going to be going from a full-fledged multilateralism into a flexible plurilateralism, how are we going to engage, which are going to be the poles, the interests, what kind of structures are going to happen, how can we work together to reform the WTO. Those are all questions that are important for many of these partners at a time where others have left de facto the engagement with the WTO, and that will be also a very, very high priority for our work going forward.
Thank you, Maria. This was fascinating. Just the list of countries you are negotiating with clear priorities, Indonesia and India by the end of the year. That's very impressive. But I have a question, and then we open the floor for you. While everybody receive one, so I should not refrain to offer one to you, Maria. And this idea, I mean, I was imagining your FTAs as an aircraft carrier. I'm sorry for the comparison, but given that we're talking about security, economic security, and beyond, and we even have a parade in China today that brings me, even further to the idea of trade, hopefully, becoming still, as you said, win-win, still driving the conversation rather than something else. I was really wondering, is this aircraft carrier, these FTAs that, we're trying to sign, strong enough for the headwinds of a world with, I wouldn't say without the WTO, but with a building but no action? Yeah, I mean, can these FTAs offer maybe a second best, if you want? I realize it's not. But how strong are they for what's coming? And if they are, I mean, how to exploit them further? You already hinted at that, but I'd like to hear whether you're positive that they can withstand the wind or not. That's my question for you. So on that note, I think we're going to open, and maybe we get a few questions, and then you can take either my questions or anybody else's question in the first round. Any questions from the floor? Yeah. So if you could introduce yourself, there's three. Let's take these three very briefly, please. And if we can show any question online at the same time so that we can take the next one online. Please, the floor is yours. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Wenyan Hu. I'm editor from ASEM Info Board. Just a question for Maria. With all those friends or the FTAs that are in the making, I still think that it's worthwhile to have more friends than less friends. On that note, I think it's still worthwhile to engage China as a factor that's the world's second largest economy. Indonesia is good, but Indonesia is only the 33 biggest trading partner of the EU. Indonesia, in the past few years, also imposed export controls over nickel, where the EU even brought Indonesia to the WTO. On India, the Commission was ambitious to initially wanted to have 3 agreements on investment, on GI, and on tariff-based.
I'm going to cut you short because you are the first question. If I allow you, we will only have a question here. So yeah.
Would there be a possibility to negotiate with China a regulatory-based agreement to address those market distortions on basically on subsidy transparency? The reason why I say that, because in the provisional text of the guide, you already have the framework and the detailed provisions where China agreed to everything, even in a WTO plus manner. Thank you.
Let's take the second and third as brief as possible. Thank you.
Yes, sorry. Sorry, Valehan Bahredinov, Kazakhstan EU Gateway from Kazakhstan. My question is simple. I'm sorry, but I didn't hear anything about Central Asia and Kazakhstan today. And which is extremely growing region. So my question is to all of you, and especially to Digitrade. We remember in April in Samarkand, it was a wonderful summit, Central Asia EU. But what is the exact results, outcomes of these negotiations and this Central Asia plus Europe format in practice? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Third question. Please introduce yourself.
Ivan Filipov, CGTS. My question is, what is your take on BRICS, though? Can it become sort of a block of so different actors. So can it become like a block which, geopolitically will be able to compete with the European Union and the United States in the long term, or is just a fork created to get cheap Russian oil? Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to add to your question, beyond the BRICS summit in Tianjin, which President Modi attended. SCO, excuse me. I wanted to also focus on SCO, on new initiatives, announced at the SCO, global governance initiative, beyond the global civilization initiative, global development initiative. You know, China is working on this very large, it's beyond BRICS, so it confused me, but it is related, because there's this new kind of alternative, if you want, global governance system that is being shaped. And I think their question is increasingly relevant because this has economic consequences. So I just wanted to add to your question that SCO and Tianjin, if you ask me, even the parade today, are part of that story. That's all from my side. So who wants to take any of the questions or my questions or any comments? Yeah, Suma.
Alicia, because this was the 20th anniversary of Bruegel, the time horizon within which I was operating was sort of the next 20 years, whereas many of the other panelists have talked about the here and now, which is probably what the audience is interested. But I just want, in a sense, to use this opportunity to indicate, particularly to the Europeans from the business sector, and there's a little sting in my question, or in my observation. So we in India think that we could be, or we wish to prepare for our so-called 30 glorieuses, okay? And the question I think that faces us for Europe is that basically, is Europe in a sense, what lessons has Europe learned from China's rise? How substantial are the degrowth, as it were, forces within Europe and European politics? And the assumption that we used to make that for global growth, for, as it were, that a rising tide lifts all boats. So that is really, I think, the core question, that basically, does Europe consider its future to be in a growing world? Does Japan see its future in a growing world? Because there is a lot of latent consumer and investment demand in India. And the question is, is there a political consensus to unleash it, or is the political consensus to restrain it, having, in a sense, drawn your conclusions from the last big growth episode? On BRICS, the only thing I would say is that there was a very important decision taken when the leaders process was invented at the time of the G20 in 2008, not to abolish the G7. That would have been the obvious thing to do, but that was not done. And indeed, the G7 has, in some perceptions, in a sense, become more of a lobby or a bloc. Now, if you wish to see the G20 as a spare tire, then, you sort of invite a movement like the BRICS. So I think the question to be asked is there any appetite in the present world environment to abolish the G7? And it may well be that the behavior of one of the erstwhile leaders of the G7 may lead to that. But all I'm saying is that if we thought of ourselves in a much more plural world, then what role the G7 had in continuing, I think is a question that needs to be asked in the North.
Who wants to take questions? We We created a breakthrough in the G7. It's a good point. Okay, so Maria.
I'll take a couple of questions that were put. Your image of an aircraft carrier made me think of names for faster, more agile boats, which is...
I chose it on purpose.
Yes, I know. And unfortunately, my English is not good enough to be able to know whether a frigate is what I need to refer to or is something bigger. But I think the point I'm trying to make is, yes, there is an instability that you get on the basis of an FTA because of the rules, because of the dispute settlement, because of the commitment to join to a joint framework. There have been at times very difficult to conclude, in part because we were under less of a pressure. It was an easier time where we were in a situation where we could take time to negotiate the perfect deal. I think those days are gone. I think the acceleration of negotiations that you see at the moment reflect the new reality. And I do think that the existence of a preferential relation or network of preferential agreements does not take away the need for multilateral basis. Even the European Commission, that has the world's largest network of free trade agreements, does more than half of its trade on the basis of the tariffs agreed under the WTO. So this is something we should not forget. You know, every time that people tell me WTO is dead, I think if it was really dead, you will be noticing that in your business daily life. But that is one point. The other point as to, I like the every rising tide raises all boats. It does if the underlying bottom of the sea is not uneven. And that is my allegory to a level playing field. If you don't have a level playing field, and that is the main problem we have at the moment with a number of countries, you're going to have not just a tide lifting everybody, but a tsunami that is going to be leaving people aside. So economic growth is very important for everybody, but in trade, you do need to respect a number of rules and take a number of disciplines that you faithfully apply if you don't want to end up with a trade that is for the benefit of some players and the detriment of others. And the situation where we are at the moment, where you see the lifting of tariffs not only coming from the United States, this is something that's been happening for a longer period of time, was in part as well the reaction to the sense that trade was used for economic development to the detriment of other countries, not only developed countries, also developing and emerging economies.
Thank you, Maria. I realize we're running out of time, so Kikochi-san, any comment? And then she went, and I doubt we'll have more time for questions. Let's see.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe I will touch upon the three points. One is the Japanese investment into the Europe. And there is a survey we have been conducting for the past 30 years, and every year we send the questionnaires to Japanese companies asking what are the challenges doing business abroad. And the opinion we are getting we get every year from those Japanese companies are that Europe, we respect the kind of predictability and stability doing business in Europe. But the challenge is the cost to comply regulations. That is the in order for Japanese companies to think more investment into Europe, then there may be some kind of deregulation is needed in European Commission, and there is a stronger, very high attention in the Draghi report, even in Japan. And that would be a very good starting point from our point of view, that it mentioned about the necessity for proceeding with the regulation and reduce the cost for the companies to comply regulations. That one thing, and that would kind of open up the more investment into Europe. We don't have to compare with the US and Europe. It's different destinations. So that's one thing. And the other one point I'd like to mention is the Quad. I mean, in terms of the BRICS context. And the Quad is the US, Japan, and the India and Australia, right? And the India used to be sort of outlier among four countries. But under the current circumstances, especially the tension between the US and India, Indian involvement in Quad is quite important. And according to the survey I mentioned, India is the #1 destination, promising destination for Japanese companies, because its market, potential market, and also the production base. So Japanese semiconductor industries are visiting India to find out the opportunity. Then that would support to establish the resilient supply chain. That maybe Japan, India, and maybe Europe. Those kind of a triangle would be a good kind of good model to have the resilient supply chains. And the third point is that the Central Asia. I understand that there is the growing attention in Central Asia. But there are 5 countries in Central Asia, but the level of development is not the same. Right. So Kazakhstan has been a very promising destination, but now we are looking at Uzbekistan because we have some sign that this country is opening up and they try to enhance the transparency. So there are many Japanese companies investing in Uzbekistan right now in the area of renewable energy, especially the solar power and wind power. And I hope that that trend would be followed by other Central Asian countries, and also attention has been paid for the greater Central Asian concept. I mean, including the Azerbaijan, Caucasus countries. So I'd like to mention that we are strongly we have a strong interest in the area. That's second. That's other thing. So that's.
Okay, thank you. I know we had to win for the last comments, but you had 2 hands up. Briefly, we're out of time. So
I just wanted to say that again, within the 20-year vision, and this goes back to work that Alicia and I worked on when I was at Bruegel for the INTA Committee of Parliament on EU-India. So really, for me, the big win of whatever agreement we arrive at is for the European Mittelstand and the Japanese Mittelstand to create an Indian Mittelstand. I just want to say that, we make it hard. A lot of the big boys kind of get natural protection as a result. But what it would take for India to be as receptive a host to the medium enterprises, I think China has succeeded in being. So that's the big win for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Jiwon, last word.
I'll just use this one. I'll try to be very brief. I think on William's question, which is, I think, not in my place to answer, but I guess, my sense is the EU doesn't have the political appetite to extract a certain regulatory mechanism out of a bigger KAI agreement, because I think the elephant in the room is beyond is beyond economics and trade. It's something much larger, and I think that impacts the EU's willingness to work with China. And China places a lot of emphasis on Central Asia. There is an annual China plus Central Asia mechanism. China actually has a visa-free travel agreement with Uzbekistan, so 2 countries' citizens can travel visa-free. So there is robust infrastructure and other investment projects going on there, including rail links. And coming back to Alicia's first question to me, I think it's fair to address it a little bit, even if we are running out of time. I think the fundamental imbalance, which the Chinese government also acknowledges and has acknowledged it for quite some years, and is trying to make a transition. It's basically like the domestic demand is just not enough to absorb the domestic production, and so it has to export. And I think it's a side effect of the development path that China has chosen, partly by going down the road of manufacturing, and it is why this is like the economic miracle in the past 40 years, and I guess it also provides some guidance for India and other emerging economies. The Chinese government is trying to this year there is now birth subsidies to newborn children for 3 years, but the amount is estimated, and people typically believe is too minimal. It's not enough. The SOEs, state-owned enterprises, have been transferring 10% of their share into the National Social Security Fund, so that the people can have a more reliable source of income after retirement. But still, the National Social Security Fund payment to a significant amount of Chinese people are still too low. The number is something like 240 yuan, which is 30 euros for 150 million Chinese senior citizens over the age of 60 years old, and the average pay is like 2,000 to 3,000 yuan, which is about 300 euros for 180 retirees over the age of 60. So that's not a lot of money. So there is not enough sufficient domestic demand there. It's a long and painful process to make that transition. I just want to make one point: is it's not a strategy to overwhelm, to hollow out Europeans' manufacturing base. That's not a political purpose. That's not what the Chinese set out to do, to hollow out all the industrial base across the world, so that there is only the Chinese supply there. But I guess that's one of the misconceptions, what I believe to be a misconception that I've come across. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm not going to summarize this because you're all trying to get out of the room. It's full of people standing. I don't know how you managed to stand for an hour. So I just want to thank the panelists, but thank you all for your engagement and for bearing with us for an hour without sitting arrangement for everybody. Thank you so much.